AI technology company functioning at the intersection of legal education, innovation, and artificial intelligence. The organization is committed to making legal learning more accessible, practice oriented, and technologically advanced. Through expert led webinars, certificate courses, research initiatives, publications, and AI enabled legal learning tools, Law Jurist seeks to bridge gap between classroom education and real world legal practice. The platform has built a growing community of students, academicians, advocates, researchers, and professionals from across India and abroad, creating an ecosystem that encourages collaborative and future oriented legal discourse. We are also grateful to the entire organizing team and collaborators whose efforts made today's session possible. Moving on to today's webinar, as technology is no longer limited to convenience in legal practice, it is gradually becoming part of litigation strategy, such as evidence analysis, case preparation, or courtroom procedure. Especially in criminal litigation, the role of AI and digital tools is expanding at a remarkable pace. At the same time, this transformation also brings important questions concerning ethics, privacy, procedural safeguards, and the reliability of technology within the justice system. Today's session aims to provide practical insights into how young lawyers and law students can understand, adapt to, and effectively engage with this changing landscape of legal practice. Moving on to it is now my privilege and honor to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's session, Ms. Varsha Singh. Ma'am is an advocate practicing before the Supreme Court of India and various high courts and is the founder and lead counsel of Lexwind Partners. She completed her Bachelor of Laws from Campus Law Center, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi, followed by a Master of Laws from the same institution. With more than a decade of active litigation practice, she has built extensive expertise in complex litigation, arbitration, redevelopment matters, RERA matters, infrastructure and hospitality projects, shareholder disputes, and high value contractual litigation. Her practice reflects a strong combination of legal strategy and commercial insight, particularly in matters involving regulatory compliance, urgent injunctive reliefs, and multi stakeholder disputes. She has represented developers, corporates, investors, housing societies, and public authorities across constitutional courts, civil courts, arbitral tribunals, and regulatory forums. Ms. Singh is particularly recognized for her practical and solution oriented approach to litigation strategy and dispute resolution. Her insights into the integration of technology and modern legal practice make her uniquely positioned to address today's topic. Ma'am, we are truly honored to have you with us today and deeply grateful for your time. We look forward to learning from your experience and expertise. Before we begin, a few instructions for all the participants. Participants are requested to maintain professional decorum throughout the session and kindly keep your microphone muted unless requested. And most of the questions, participant may post your questions in the chat box as a Q&A segment will be followed after the speaker's address. Then participants are there will be a feedback form sent in the chat box. We request all the participants to please fill out the form in order to mark attendance and receive your participant certificates. Now, without taking much of your valuable time, I respectfully invite our esteemed speaker to kindly address the gathering. Ma'am, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Dwarka. Thank you, Advocate Ayush, for inviting me to interact with the vibrant and the inquisitive students across India and, in fact, outside India. The topic today is something which is very, very interesting because it primarily deals with whether AI and technology in criminal litigation and trial practice has some role or not. So, before I begin with anything, it is important to understand that how the criminal litigation and what is the purpose of the trial practice and how the entire. Somebody is asking that I'm not visible properly. So, is it Dwarka? I'm visible to you?
Ma'am, like the screen is a bit blur. That's it, ma'am. Maybe the lighting problem.
Oh, just give me some time. Wait, just I think this is fine now.
Yes, ma'am, better.
So, before we begin with anything, understanding what exactly is AI and how the technology is too much into the criminal litigation or how it will impact the criminal litigation and trial practice. Before that, we need to understand that what exactly is the purpose of any criminal law, whether it is Indian criminal law or when we go to other nation. The purpose is that the justice should be delivered in an effective manner. This is the ultimate purpose. Entire criminal trial practice this is the only purpose, that the justice should be delivered in an effective manner. And who is responsible for delivering justice? Definitely the courts, the lawyers, the bar, the bench, they are responsible so that the justice should be delivered in an effective manner. The entire criminal litigation, the burden of proving the guilt of the accused, the burden of proving that the accused has committed the crime, there's two sides, the accused and the state, lies upon the public prosecutor largely. That public prosecutor has to prove the guilt of the accused. When we talk about the Indian context, beyond reasonable doubt, that is something we have learned in the Indian criminal jurisprudence, isn't it? So I think everybody is aware about it, that in India, if I talk about, because most of the audience are from India and they are also there, I was told that the audience are also from outside India. So we will try to understand the comparative way that how it is happening in India and how it will happen in other countries. That the entire the canon of in criminal jurisprudence lies in the fact that the justice will be delivered in an effective manner. The justice will only be delivered once the guilt of the accused is proved beyond reasonable doubt. And now the context is that the criminal litigation, if we talk about how the criminal case comes into the motion, it is important that how the criminal case will come into the picture. As into the basic, either some complaint will be filed or the FIR will be registered. Yes, you have to. In Uganda, it is the same that somebody is messaging that it is the same that the guilt has to be proved in the beyond reasonable doubt, and you don't have to. There is no scope for the preponderance of the possibilities. There is no scope. You have to prove, and if there exists a single percent of doubt, the benefit will always go to the accused. That is the fundamental principle. So now the entire criminal litigation, how does it begins? It begins with the fact that the moment some offense has been committed, the offense has been committed. See, it is not the private case that if there is a contract and you do a breach of the contract. So now the party who is being affected by it, if it is largely one or two, but when you commit some offense, why it is considered? Because crime at large is considered to be something that is against the state, against the country, against the state. When I talk about the state, in the jurisprudence, we believe that a state is a country in itself. So now, even if the offense has been committed towards a particular individual, it will be considered as if that is committed against the whole state. So now the guilt of the accused has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. And now, the moment the offense has been committed, there is a fundamental principle that the person against whom the offense has been committed, or any person who is related to that person, or even if the anonymous person, can also go and lodge the first information report. That first information report is in respect to the that some crime has been committed, some offense has been committed in the police station. So now, the moment the information is lodged or the complaint is filed, the complaint is filed in the court, the criminal law comes into the motion. The moment the FIR is lodged, the moment the complaint is filed, the criminal law comes into the motion. The moment the criminal law comes into the motion, now the role of the state entity comes into the picture. So now, before I begin with the topic AI technology, I would like to give you two examples. Last year, what happened? Before we begin with anything, just a minute. So last year, what happened? Two wake-up cases that came from the Indian courts. Bombay High Court, there was one quasi-judicial officer. He cited three judicial decisions in a tax matter, and all three decisions were AI hallucination. They did not even exist, because you have to come before the courts with some precedent, and those precedents were not exactly that the case had happened. This was an AI hallucination. The court observed that AI results must be duly cross-verified before using them. Officer had copied AI output without any verification. The next case that came before the court, that was a Delhi High Court, that the party filed a petition that was generated through the chat GPT. Citation were entirely fabricated. They did not even existed. The judge reprimanded the lawyer publicly on the judicial record, and he was asked to withdraw the case. He was asked to withdraw the case and then file the fresh case. So before we move into this, if you talk about the India particularly, India criminal justice crisis and the AI is imperative. Why do we need AI? As of now, if you took to the data, that 4.59 crores cases are pending in the Indian courts, and you would be surprised to know that out of 4.59 crore, 3.5 crores are the criminal matters in the backlog. Now with the current space, whatever we have an infrastructure, the judges we have, the courtrooms we have, it will not take less than 300 years to complete those backlog at the current space. So this is a surprisingly a big data that you can look to. 300 years. How many years? That is a 300 years to complete the cases, the pendency of the cases. Now imagine a situation that those among those cases there will be your own one client who will be under trial prisoner, who will be waiting for your bail, or who is waiting in the jail that his trial will start. Now imagine a situation, being a lawyer, you being a lawyer or being a part of the bar, you are helpless. You can't do anything. Because see, the entire system is like that. The FIR is lodged today and the trial begins after 10 years, because you have to follow the process, and the process is very cumbersome. That FIR is lodged today, the information is lodged today, and the statements are recorded after 3-4 years. So AI is the need of an hour. AI has already entered in the courtroom. AI has already entered in our system. So now we have to understand this 3-track model, how AI touches your practice. If you are into a criminal practice, how AI will touch you. Now, investigation. The first part is investigation. The trial is divided into 3 basic structure. The criminal practice is divided into 3 basic structure. That one is investigation, the other is inquiry, and the third one is trial. Now, investigation, the duty of doing the investigation primarily lies with the police officer. The police officer concerned will do the investigation, and the purpose of doing the investigation is the collection of the evidences. That he has to collect the evidence, because entirely the entire case depends upon what evidences the public prosecutor is proving before the court, or prosecutor is proving before the court, and what evidence that the defense is producing for his own defense. So entire criminal jurisprudence lies upon the fundamental principle of 3-track model. The one is investigation, the second is inquiry, and the third is trial. So now the police, let's examine, let's one by one. Police uses an AI for suspect identification, that we call as a facial recognition system. How many of you are aware with the facial recognition system? Yes. So now police uses AI for suspect identification, digital evidence analysis, crime scene reconstructions, and charge sheet drafting. So now imagine a situation that there is one technology which is called as a facial recognition system. So let's start with the AI tool. We have one AI tool which will already identifying the suspect in the criminal investigation across, let's say, not only India, to some other countries as well. So in India, Delhi police, Hyderabad police, Mumbai police, and the different police departments and the other states has deployed the facial recognition technology. Basically, when we talk about the technology, we have MPED 5, that is an AI-based image enhancement and matching tools that takes a low quality of CCTV. Let's say crime has been committed. One crime has been committed. Let's robbery has been committed. And in robbery, you understand what is robbery? Aggravated form of theft or extortion is called robbery. When the theft has an aggravated level, that it has impact on the life, or taking the property with the putting the fear in the mind of the other person, that is a robbery. And if the robbery has been committed, So there was a CCTV footage. CCTV footage, and CCTV footage may we have find that there is one suspect is there. So now what this facial recognition system is doing, this is basically, it is an AI based image. It is an algorithm, and that algorithm will match the searches from the database. So everything is like they are searching, if there is in that algorithm, if the image of that person is already there, so from their database the police will try to search about that person. So those database include the crime and crime tracking network system that we call as an CCTNS, which aggregates the criminal records across the India. So basically, criminal tracking network system will track the records of the criminals across the India. So in some deployment, what happened? Facial recognition tools, such database are linked to the government identity record as well. So now what is there? There is a probability. So facial recognition system in the investigation stage in itself, let's say crime has been committed, robbery was committed, and the information was lodged before the police station. Now there is only one evidence, which is that with the police officer, that is a CCTV footage, and that CCTV footage was very very blur, that you cannot even normally from the CCTV footage image, we cannot identify that who actually committed the offense. In that situation, the facial recognition system can give you some clue that yes, from the database, from the algorithm, we are matching that this person may be the suspect. No, exactly. I tell you that this is a probabilistic identification. This is not something which is 100%. Here, that we have to understand, most important thing to understand about the facial recognition as an evidence, it is probable evidence and not determinative. What is the challenge before the court is these days, that although we have in basically when we talk about India, we have the new acts, Bharati Nyaya Sanhita, Bharati Suraksha Adhiniyam, Bharati Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, but the problem is what? Who made those acts, and at what point of time in 2021-22 when it was started drafting, that they have never thought of integrating AI into the act. They have made the act, they have made that we will deal later on. So now this is a probable evidence and not the determinative. System does not say that this is accused. Even if facial recognition system has identified the suspect from the database itself, but cannot say that he is accused. It says that there is a probable chance. The chance might be 90%, 80%, 70%, or 72%. It is a statistical output. So now what happened? And the probability, when there is a probability, that definitely contains an error. And what we have believed in the criminal jurisprudence, the guilt of the accused, the entire investigation has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. Right? So now the probability might contains the error. There is a possibility that they might contain the error. So 90% match is there, that yes, this is the suspect from the database and he has committed the offense, that the police has some clue. Right? So now the 10% chance of the system has identified the wrong person. There is a probability that 10% that the wrong person has been identified. So in absolute terms, across thousands of identification, the 10% real people who are wrongfully identified. There may be a chance that 90% is true, but 10% is chance is what? That the wrong person might be identified. So what is the key takeaway is that the facial recognition systems are useful, and the police across the states of the India and across the other countries, they have started adopting it, and this is a probabilistic identifier. And now we have to understand that real people who may be arrested, who may be charged, and who may be tried on the basis of the algorithm, in that 10%, that was wrong. So now the person who actually committed the offense was not identified, and the police has 100% relied upon the algorithm, which was based upon the data. So now what is the challenge? That yes, in some cases these are very very beneficiary when it comes to there are no other evidence apart from CCTV. So if you talk about the UK court, if you talk about the United Kingdom court, the police use of FRS was considered to be unlawful. One of the case was there, Bridges versus South Wales Police, it was held that the UK Court of Appeal has held that police use of FRS was unlawful. It lacked adequate legal basis and failed proportionality test. It has no equivalent binding rule yet. Now, so I want to give you a practical scenario. Take an example, everyone. Your client, you are a lawyer, your client is charged with the robbery. The charge sheet says that accused was identified by the CCTV footage. And the technology which was adopted was using a facial recognition, no further detail. What do? Take a pause, think about it. Your client was charged with the robbery, and robbery, I told you that it is an extended form of theft or extortion involving the use or the threat of immediate violence, hurt, or wrongful restraint, right? So now what will we do? Your client was purely arrested on the ground of only CCTV footage, and that CCTV footage was also not clear. The identification of the accused was based upon the facial recognition system. So now, what you as a lawyer, now you are going to be a future criminal lawyer. So now you will file a, because see, the prosecution will always try to prove that the facial recognition system which is used by the prosecution, which is used by the state as in technology, that is 100% correct, right? So now what you will do, you will file a disclosure application asking the prosecution to identify the specific AI system used, right? You will ask the public prosecutor through an application that which AI system it was used, its version number, the database it searched, right? The match percentage it produced. It is important that you will ask that what data you have searched. Now the database it search. Now then the percentage it match, and the tool that was validated on the Indian facial data. It is or the country in which you are living. So you can always put an application asking the role of the public prosecutor, which specific AI system you used, what is the version number, what database it searched, the match percentage found. And now you as a lawyer can always challenge on the match percentage. If the match percentage in the facial recognition system is 70%, now your chances of winning case is 30%, because you will always try to put as a defense lawyer that 30% is the chances that my client is wrongfully arrested, my client is wrongfully detained, the charge sheet against my client is only primarily based upon the CCTV footage, and the version number, the match percentage it produced is what not validated. So now you have to ask in the application whether an independent human examiner verified the match and all audit log of the case system used in the case. So next, you understood that first what you have to do, you will have to file a disclosure application asking the prosecution. Second, you commission a counter examination. Now, being a lawyer, the cross examination is something which is considered to be the soul of the entire trial system. So now you commission a counter examination. You retain, you can ask the public prosecutor, you can ask the state to retain a qualified digital forensic expert who can examine the original CCTV, the enhancement process, the matching methodology, and provides a written opinion on the reliability. As we know that the expert evidence are considered to be as an evidence for the purpose of the trial. So you can always ask the court to appoint someone who has a qualified digital forensic expert to examine the CCTV footage. And the third is that now your client is in the jail, and he was arrested only on the ground that CCTV footage was matched by the FRS system. So at bail stage, you can always argue that identification test rest was on the probability algorithm. It was a percentage, not a fact, and that has not been independently verified, and that does not establish prima facie the guilt to the standard required for the custodial remand. You can always counter it that yes, lordship, I'm asking the bail for my client because my client was arrested only on the basis of certain probability and not the percentage, not only on the fact, only on the one CCTV footage, and the CCTV footage was not clear, it was through the FRS system. So definitely the court will understand, because CCTV footage, what will happen, the prosecution will say in the counter that AI confirmed it. The prosecution will also come into the counter when the bail application will be moved. He will say that, see, prosecution will say that yes, it was an AI confirmed it. So now your response, what exactly does confirmed? What was the percentage? What was the error rate? And then who validated it? There are three major questions. That who come to, what was the percentage? Now who confirmed it? And what was the error rate? And who validated it? Do we have some expert for the validation? If they cannot answer this question, and they often cannot, the identification is a lead and not an evidence. You have to close your statement. So FRS system we have. And the second is that, which is more important, that is a predictive policing. In investigation stage, or even if the crime has not been committed, there is one concept of predictive policing, that is an algorithm pre-crime problem. Now, the second AI application in the criminal investigation, because I told you that investigation, inquiry, and the trial, there are three stages of the criminal jurisprudence. So, investigation with another important thing is that is a predictive policing. Now, the second AI application in the criminal investigation is predictive policing. And I want you to understand exactly what this means before we discuss a legal challenge. Ministry of Law and Justice in India has confirmed that they have that they are allowed to use the AI to analyze the crime pattern, identify the high risk areas, and to flag individual assessed as posing an elevated risk of criminal behavior. What they're saying that elevated risk of criminal behavior. They are not talking about the individual who have committed an offense. The predictive policing is based upon uh, that some database, that let's say a slum area is there, examine an area which is slum area. So it is generally believed from the database that the people who are living in the slum, they are dealing with the psychopathic substances, they are dealing in the drugs. So area is marked as in a database that yes, these people are using the drugs or a psychopathic substance. So now this area is considered to be the marked area. So now the this historical crime data that these algorithms are trained on reflect and the policing pattern for the past. Like past may, if you go and see that in past, the police used to do the raid and search and seizure in those slums area. So now database and the more criminal records that the particular community, that the particular class of people or particular area, or the algorithm will flag as an high risk area, and which leads to more policing, that people will go, the police will go do the search, arrest some person, and that doesn't have any exact percentage that whether the crime has been committed in that area or not. So for a criminal lawyer, that you all are a future criminal lawyer, the immediate challenge is this: in any preemptive surveillance before the offense has been committed, before the crime has been committed, watch listing or action taken against your client on the basis of a predictive algorithm output without a specific cognizable offense has been committed, it is constitutionally exposed. Now the problem is that sometimes the AI in criminal litigation and the trial, you cannot 100% rely upon some software, some database, to uh, it, uh, curtail somebody's personal liberty. Why? Because there is a difference in the cases of the criminal matters. Why? Because somebody's life is at the danger. Any wrong data, any wrong algorithm can curtail my personal liberty, and nobody has a right to curtail my personal liberty. That is the reason when we are using AI, I'm not saying that it will not help. Even if the even the government is also trying to make AI as a part of the investigation, part of the inquiry, part of the trial, but the human interference, the human examination to every data is very, very important. Why? Because any decision of the court in the cases of the criminal matter has a direct impact upon the life and the personal liberty, and it will be always a constitutional challenge. The constitutionally it will be exposed. So if you can remember, and you are the Indian law student, Putta Swami judgment, that which talks about the surveillance without legal basis. You cannot. What is the predictive policing? Predictive policing is what? It is a preemptive surveillance, that somebody is doing a preemptive surveillance on me. So it is also not allowed. Why? Yes, right to privacy. Puttaswamy judgment is surveillance without legal basis, without legitimate aim, and without proportionality violates the fundamental right to privacy. So, predictive policing, as deployed today, fails all three limbs in the Indian state. There is no law authorizing it. The aim is overbroad, and the third is it is disproportionate. Article 14, it's also the algorithm disproportionately targeting what why everybody is equal before the law, equality before the law. So now the algorithm has targeted the particular some area, the particular community, the particular class, the particular people. And so now if the algorithm has disproportionately targeting the individual from a specific community, religion, or economic background, which the data strongly suggests, it violates the equal protection guarantee. So it fails on the constitutional ground. So basically, FRS and predictive policing are the pre-investigation stage before the FIR is lodged. Now, let's say the FIR has been lodged. Now, what the AI can help it out? So, so now the AI assisted FIR filing. This is good. Now the third AI application is less dramatic but more immediate, present in your practice as a lawyer. AI tools are these days used to assist in drafting the first information report. I don't know whether you all have seen the FIR, how it looks like. The Ministry of Law and Justice has confirmed that FIR are now being drafted, structured, and in some cases generated with the AI assistance before a human officer reviews and sign them. So now, what I said in the beginning itself, that you generate the AI through generate the FIR through the AI, but it is important that the human officer review is very very important before he signs them, because handwritten FIR has an authentic texture of police station. Let's say I'll give you the example. Being a criminal lawyer, what I believe that the winning part of the criminal lawyer is that we have to be more focused upon the cross examination. And most of the criminal litigation, criminal trial, and at the stage of the cross examination, because there are three types of examination: examination in chief, cross, and then re. Examination in chief is basically the party who calls his own witness, he does an examination in chief, and the cross examination is opposite parties question the questions which are put in the examination in chief, they cross that questions. And then re-examination is against the party who call his own witness, he re-examine on some part of what is something new that has come in the cross examination. So cross examination as a defense lawyer is something which is very very important. So what happens, a handwritten FIR, what was the problem in the handwritten FIR, how the AI based FIR and the clean charge sheet can help the correct database. So handwritten FIR has an authentic texture of a police station, that FIR was lodged at 2 a.m. Now it has consistency, it has timeline errors, it has the kind of small contradiction that in cross examination become the foundation of doubt. Now the texture is a raw material for a defense. Now AI assisted FIR is clean, professionally structured, internally consistent, and grammatically correct, right? It reads like a document was prepared rather than written in the heat of the moment. It is prepared properly by following the proper mechanism. So now, as a response, always compare the AI assisted FIR against the original complaint, and the daily diary report, that is a case diary report, the scene notes, and the first recorded statement of the complainant. Look for a gap, that even if the AI, if you as a lawyer, you are coming across the FIR against the original complaint, daily police report, or the scene note, the gap between the polish and the raw fact is your cross examination. And if you find some gap is there, so that will help you to win as a defense lawyer. So this is what is important when in AI assistant FIR filing. Now next is AI digital forensic reports. This is important. The four and the most widespread AI application in the criminal investigation is digital forensic. Now you'll ask that what is digital forensic? This is where most of you encounter the AI evidence in your practice right now. AI tools, that one AI tool, that what it will help, it will try to help to call a detailed records, identified the pattern of the communication, that some accuse is there. So what was his pattern of communication, at what time he used to call the particular person. So now they are being used to extract and reconstruct the deleted data of the mobile services or the mobile devices. So AI in digital forensic is definitely going to help in one way. They are being used to map location data and produce timeline of the movement. They are used to analyze the social media content of for evidence of intent or planning. That through, like, if you go and examines individuals account one by one, it will take time. So now if you have an AI assisted digital forensic expert who will analyze your basically what was your pattern, what type of content before commission of the crime, what type of content you are posting on your social media, your timelines, your movement, they are being used to analyze the forensic experts. So now documents that are presented before the court as an authoritative technical conclusions. So in those cases, the forensic reports are going to help you out. Now the question again, there is a challenge. Here is the fundamental problem. When we talk about the Indian context or some other country, there is always a fundamental problem with respect to one of those reports. They are basically the output of a black box. What exactly is the algorithm was trained on the data. Again, we are coming, everything was coming on the data. The entire algorithm of AI digital forensic report is based upon the data. So now this data may have been biased, incomplete, or no. I'm coming. Somebody have asked that breach of the privacy. Definitely, I'm coming to that point. This data may have been biased, incomplete, or incorrectly labeled. Now, algorithm has a known error rate, which I have discussed, that there is always a possibility. This is a probable. Whatever AI that has been used in whatever technology we are using, there is all that is always based upon the probability. And when there is a probability, it is not determinative. So there is always a possibility that the error rate will always be there. Maybe 2%, 5%, 6%. So 2% even. So now the 2% error rate is there. So definitely your client may be in that one, 2%. My question is, because we are going to be a defense lawyer, so my client will be in that 2%. So that rate is often not disclosed. In cases of AI in forensic report, that AI is not disclosing the rate of error. Now the report is in itself is a problem. Now come to the challenge, what all challenge it will have. The first challenge, that what software that was being used. What I told you, that name and the version. Now what methodology they have used, what is the error data. We as a lawyer will always demand for every AI forensic report that whether that forensic report is disclosing these facts or not. Name and the version of specific AI tool or software used, the methodology applied, how the algorithm process that data, known error rate of the tool, whether it has been independently validated by some human examiner, whether the tool was validated specifically for the Indian language or the country that is being using that AI in forensic reports, regional data pattern, and the type of the device involved. The third is that the chain of custody of the original device. When it was seized in the forensic cases, FSL report also talks about when the data was seized, by whom it was seized, in what condition it was seized, and how it was handled before the forensic analysis. This is something as a lawyer you can always challenge in the court, that when it was seized, because we as a lawyer have to talk about holistically about the evidences, when it was seized, by whom it was seized, in what condition it was seized, and how it was handled before the forensic analysis. Now, as per the Indian laws, we have, before the Bharati Sakshi Adhiniyam came into the picture, we have this Indian Evidence Act, which talks about Section 65 A and B, that mandatory certificate. You are producing some certificate before the court, that now the qualification and the specific knowledge in the person who signed that this is the certificate which are following the standards of the law that is applicable in that particular country. All raw data that is produced by the device examination, not just the AI generated analysis of that data. So what I want to make it clear is that demanding this information or relying upon the AI digital forensic report, it's not something which is stopping us for fighting justice for our client, but it has to be handled very carefully. It is all based upon the probability, and it is not a determinative, right? And now any part that tells you the inappropriate data is coming out, that is definitely going to challenge your right to privacy, and which is considered to be the fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. When we talk about the India and the other country as well, right to privacy is considered to be the most important cherished right, the most important human rights that anybody can have. Example. Now I'm coming to the AI digital forensic report. I'm just telling you one case, that a real case that was coming from the Maharashtra. Uh, there's an hit and trial case. The Nagpur hit and run case was there, and the Maharashtra police AI was used to scan thousands of CCTV videos and identify a specific vehicle. Try to understand. Police was trying to identify the vehicle that is used in a hit and run case within 36 hours. Now imagine what's a good part. There was some hit and run case. It's not only the India, it's about any other country. Let's say there is some hit and run case, and in that case it will be very difficult for the police to identify that which vehicle has committed an offense. In those scenario, if we have some data fetching system which can find it out, that from the CCTV footage, that yes, this is the vehicle which has actually has caused the offense, and now the case was solved. The vehicle was identified within 36 hours, and the case was solved rapidly. Now I want to acknowledge something here, as in future criminal lawyers, and to all the professors and the law students, whoever is attending this webinar. So now I want to acknowledge is that credibility requires that I do also agree upon AI has a genuine power in the criminal investigation. I think everybody is agree to it. Now, but there is a crucial distinction your clients needs to understand. Now you also need to understand, because we as a lawyer will always have to think about our client what is actually relief he is asking for, because we as a lawyer can only give you the relief. Solving a case and proving a guilt are two different things. Solving a case and proving the guilt of a two different thing. The case is solved, the vehicle is identified. Now the AI was a lead, it pointed to a vehicle. Before that vehicle's owner can be convicted of a criminal offense, the identification must satisfy the evidentiary standard that is important. You have to understand, even if the vehicle was identified, that is fine. Solving a case and proving the guilts are two different things. The vehicle was identified, and before the owner can be convicted, now you as a lawyer have to play here. Now what you have to play, that the speed of the investigation does not determine the admissibility of the evidence. You have to understand the speed of the investigation will never decide the admissibility of the evidence. The evidence, there are two types of evidence. The evidence must be relevant, but it is not admissible. See, you can give the evidence before the court, the evidence with respect to the disputed fact and the evidence with respect to the relevant fact. You can always give the evidence, but it is not. Admissibility of evidence is something which is very, very important. So in those cases, reliability of methodology does. In those cases, the constitution of a country protects the individual from being convicted. That is something which is very, very important. Now the another important point I'll complete quickly, that even if the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of India and the Supreme Court of the other countries, basically the Supreme Court of India is using a portal for assistance that we call as an portal for assistance in the code efficiency, that we call as in SUPES. It is an AI tool that analyzes the case file, which is important. The AI is very important in analyzing the case file, surfaces the relevant precedent, assists the judicial research. The prioritization problem, what SUPES service the judges see, what it omits may be missed. So now this software is analyzing something which judge might miss. So Supreme Court is using SUPES Adalat.ai, there are certain AI that the court are using. Basically, all Kerala court, especially Kerala court, is very, very pro into this. Kerala court, district courts, they are using the record the witness deposition in real time. How many of you have visited the police station? I don't know whether you all anybody have you visited the police station or not. Have you seen that now these days the statement of the victim, the moment the FIR is lodged, the statement of the persons who those who are acquainted with the fact and circumstances of the cases are to be recorded, and that makes a part of the record. So now the moment the statements, there are two types of statement. The one statement that is recorded in the police station, that is a part of the investigation. The one statement that is recorded in the court, that's a part of the trial. uh, there is another difference. There is one other statement that is recorded in the part of the investigation, but not by the police officer, but the judicial magistrate. Let's say example of the rape victim. If there is a rape victim, now police will try to get his statement recorded by the judicial magistrate. If there is a confession, that will be recorded not by the police officer, it will be recorded by the judicial magistrate. It's a part of the investigation, but the procedure will be followed by the recording those statement in the police station. So now these days, the real time witness or the person who are acquainted with the fact and circumstances of the case, the statements are now recorded through the camera. You will on the camera and the police will start using those statement, exactly recording those statement in those language in which the person is acquainted with the fact and circumstances. So basically these AIs are also helping it. I think I am running short of time. There are question session, but I'll conclude it very quickly. So now the problem is what, let's say take example of Adalat AI. Adalat.ai was developed by an Indian legal technology company which research linked to the international institution. It listens the spoken testimony, transcribe it in real time, and the transcript is immediately uploaded to the court digital record system. It is good. Why? Because when you go to the police station, they take a lot of time in recording the statement, and now there will be somebody who will who will enter into the record. Now we have through Adalat.ai, the entire testimony transcribes it in real time, and the transcript is immediately uploaded to the court digital record. Now, for access to justice, what I talked in the beginning only, that the criminal jurisprudence, what is the principle of the criminal jurisprudence is that the justice should be delivered in an effective manner. And justice should be delivered in an effective manner can only be done when there will be the balance of the interest. Balance of the interest on between whom? The one side, the state, the another side is an accused. And when both rights will be balanced, and this balancing are done by the courts. So when both the rights will be balanced, then only the justice will be delivered in an effective manner. So for those, what is the challenge? Now deposition that took hours now have an immediate through the Adalat.ai. It is legible. It is a searchable digital record because your entire script was immediately uploaded to the court's digital record system. Now for under trial prisoners whose case drag on for years, partially because deposition recording is slow. The statement was not recorded. This should speed things up. That's a benefit. But for criminal lawyers, again, AI creates a critical new vulnerability that I need you to take absolutely understand. What? You said he did not strike the complaint. AI has listened it. He did strike the complaint. I saw no knife. You say I saw a knife. The accused left at 9. The accused arrived at 9. You have to understand that what is the complexity, because you as a lawyer will always have to challenge, right? He said no, she said no. There was no marks on the body. There was marks on the body. Now the transcript immediately after deposition session ends. Now you said something. Now transcript has read it the way it has to. There might be error because I told you in the beginning that the chances of error is even if 2% there is. So now ideally as a lawyer, before you leave the court premises, read every line for your client. Object to any misrecognition on the record in the same session. Have correction by the presiding officer then and there. Do not leave the courtroom assuming the transcript is accurate, and it is in a matter involving the custodial sentence. This is non-negotiable. So you have to be very, very cautious when these statements are recorded through the AI. So this was about the this Adalat AI. So this is what I was trying to say you. Now coming back to, I think Dwarka, we are running off time. You have some question? So now in the trial, I'll conclude in short. Now, once the investigation ends up, now the matter comes before the court as in cognizance, and the cognizance, the police ends up the investigation by filing the police report, which we call as in charge sheet. Once the charge sheet has been filed, the charge sheet will also be can be assisted through the AI, and the police is taking help of the different AIs for preparing the clean charge sheet, and then the matter will go to the judicial record, and for the first time some matter will go to the judicial record, and the judiciary will apply his own mind, the courts will apply his own mind to the police record, and they will take the cognizance of that matter. And once the cognizance is taken, now the date will be fixed, that whether the both the parties will be given an opportunity on the basis of the charge sheet, that whether the officially the charge will be framed by the court or not. Charge sheet is not something that the trial has started. The actual trial will begin from the moment the charge sheet will be framed. And if in the case no charge sheet is framed, because public prosecutor was not able to put his own point that by what evidences they are going to prove the guilt of the accused, then there will be no trial in that case. And once the charge sheet will be formed, the trial will begin. During the trial also, this AI can assist the court, the AI can help the court, and you can also draft research through the AI. For the lawyers, as I can tell you that for one work we were taking 10-15 hours, 5 hours. That work has become easy as of now, but you should always apply your human mind, you should always apply the human intervention should always be there in all AI drafted documents. Read carefully and then understand it, that as a lawyer you always be ready for counter, always be ready for the think about how I can cross examine, how I can counter, how I can defeat this point. So this is all about. And then at the evidence stage also, I was having a lot to discuss, but look at, there are so many slides, but I am running short of time. Let's say I will tell you one important case and then I will end with the session. In India, you must understanding the state of NCT of Delhi versus Navjot Singh Sandhu, that is an parliament attack case. In this case, the prosecution relied upon the electronic records, call record, printed transcript with Section 65 certificate. Now the question was there, can oral testimony substitute for a mandatory certificate? In this case, because since this was a very sensitive case, because it was a national importance case, so in this case the court comes with the opinion that oral testimony is sufficient to prove the authenticity of the electronic record. As per Section 65, certificates technical formality could be waived out. Section 65 of the Indian Evidence Act. Result, a decade of inconsistency across the courts. Today we are trying as a lawyer, as a bar or as a bench to incorporate the technology, incorporate the AI into the criminal jurisprudence. It is difficult because see, in 2005 the Supreme Court has come up with its own opinion that the oral testimony is sufficient to prove the authenticity of the electronic record, but it is actually not. It was overruled by an RPV case that it is as baseline that created the chaos requiring the correct citation. Is now this case is, now you have to understand, any evidence you are producing before the court and you are saying, lordship, I have this evidence, this is electronic evidence and I want to prove it, I am giving an oral testimony. No, you will have to obtain a certificate. That is certificate, then only you can present before the court. Oral testimony cannot waive the authenticity of obtaining the certificate. Sometimes again we will connect with the topic. I have a lot to discuss, but we are running short of time. Dwarka, please start the question answer if any have.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you very much for the insightful session. Moving on to the Q&A session. Can AI realistically assist advocates in legal research, drafting, and evidence analysis without compromising professional judgment?
See, AI can always assist you in drafting. It can also always see if even if you are doing a research. Let's say some case X case is being coming through the AI generated response. Try to research it through the authentic search web, SCC, Manupatra, or some other live law. Make it that this case actually exists, and then you should rely upon it.
Next question, ma'am. Do you believe courts in India are ready to integrate advanced AI driven systems into judicial and litigation processes?
Yes, it is. See, I told you in the beginning that the government of India and the Ministry of Law and Justice has allocated some 7,200 crores rupees for 700 to 7,000 some crores of rupees for integrating technology into the bench and the bar. And for that, 53 crores have already been allocated, were decided to allocate for the AI thing. So definitely they are going to help in the future.
How can criminal lawyers balance technological efficiency with the human and emotional aspects of advocacy?
You need to read. You need to read the see entire criminal litigation, criminal lawyer. This based upon three facts. You have to remember: act, tact, and fact. Three things are very very important. You need to understand the act. You need to understand what exactly is mentioned in what section, in what allegation is upon your client. Then the facts is something which you need to understand properly. And act, tact, and fact, and how tactfully you are analyzing the your case, AI assistance. This is what is the most important thing in the criminal litigation.
What are the risks of depending too much on AI in litigation?
You stop using your own brain. This is something a biggest risk.
And next question, ma'am. How do we use AI in an efficient manner while not overshadowing the skills of the advocate?
See, try to first draft the whatever you are doing, try to draft by your own, and then you generate another copy through the AI and try to find out that where what you missed, what AI missed, and then you can have your own version. You can have understand that what you have, what story was in your mind, and what AI generated, how you thought. So balance is something which is required.
Ma'am, with AI tools becoming more common in criminal litigation, how can young law students and future advocates use AI ethically and effectively without compromising legal research quality and professional judgment?
See, you what I said, that try to read the original judgment. Try to read the original case files as a interns, what as advisable. Try to at least invest your time into one whole case, that how this case has proceeded, how the evidences were recorded by the court, how the cross examination was done, what was the question that came up the cross examination, and then you will be able to understand what how the case moves in a particular manner. Don't depend 100% yourself. See, AI is there to help you. It's not there to replace you, right? Nobody can replace the lawyer mind, right? So taking help from something is important, but do not depend yourself into that 100%.
As we come to the end of today's session, on behalf of the entire team at Law Jurist, I extend our sincere gratitude to Ms. Varsha Singh for taking out time from her extremely busy schedule and sharing such valuable insights with all of us. As today's discussion has demonstrated that while technology and AI are transforming legal practices at an unprecedented pace, the core values of advocacy, such as integrity, analytical reasoning, and constitutional responsibility, and having a human judgment, continue to remain central in the administration of justice. I would also like to thank all the participants for their enthusiastic participation, and we expect that participants have filled the feedback form, and we hope to see you again in our upcoming sessions and initiatives. Until then, stay connected with Law Jurist. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone.